This is Terrence Tuck with MTech Roofing Systems doing a roof inspection for Renee and Keith. Renee and Keith, the first thing I'm looking for is basically overall condition of the shingle. And since we have had hail, I'm looking at the shingle to make sure that it hasn't been impacted by the hail. You said this roof is right around 8 to 9 years old. First place I start looking is the ridge, because the ridge is bent and it's not directly fastened to a flat piece of decking. So in the middle of this, if there was, severe impact of hail damage, you'd be able to see it on the top of the ridges. Now there's some stuff like that. I believe that's just due to age, stuff like that right there. And there's not a whole lot of ventilation on this roof. So what you're starting to see is blistering, starting to see granule loss, and that's because there's lack of ventilation. Nowadays, when we build roofs, we put ridge vent across the ridges. And of course, these are called hips. If you don't have ridge vent, usually what they'll do is they'll put box vents. So they'll cut a spot on your roof, you'll put a vent down, or you can do a power attic fan for this roof. Generally, you would probably see one right here, one on that side. However, you're starting to see that granules are coming off and it's starting to blister up just a little bit. That's just because there's a lack of ventilation up here. Another thing I want to go over is with these two components in particular is this shingle overlaps. Now, not a big deal. And that one's actually broken, but not a big deal. What you'll realize is water gets under here, and if it gets stuck under there, the sun never dries it up because it's underneath the shingle. Well, on this one, I'll show you exactly what it does. If you look up underneath there, you can see a nail. So water will hit that nail and the water will just stay stagnant, and eventually it'll lead to a rusted nail head, which could eventually lead to a problem. I wouldn't say within the next year, I wouldn't say within the next 2 years, but eventually at the end of the life expectancy on this roof, you can expect to see that nail will start rusting and could lead to problems, just like this one right here. At one point in time, there was sealant on here. Now the sealant's wearing off and you can tell that nail is rusted. These have sealant on them. Same thing here. You can tell that the sealant has worn off. Now they're starting to rust. And the pipe boot's installed correctly. Nowadays, when we build roofs, we'd put a UV collar for a second layer of protection. Of course, you see that this one is only 8 years old, so it's not dry rotted. This one right here is starting to show signs of dry rot, how it's starting to crack. And eventually what happens is when it'll crack all the way down, now water can run directly down that pipe. Like I said, these aren't problems that could lead to water intrusion within the next year, 2 years, but definitely something to look and keep an eye on. Have your roof inspected at least 1 to 2 times a year, if not at least once a year. Stuff like that, brittleness, granule loss. And then up here, so this, on every ridge, you got a shingle that caps it off, because at the end of this ridge, you have shingles that go this way, then you have shingles that go this way. To cap it off, you would just cut a shingle, put it on top, makes it look unique. And at one point, there was sealant up on these. However, that sealant has worn off. Now you're starting to see rusted nail heads. They won't back out, within a year. But again, stuff that I want to make you aware of, because this is what I do for a living. Rusted nail heads here. And then I know there was some rusted nail heads on the front. And while I'm up here, another thing that I look at is gutter condition. Gutters are in great condition. I look to make sure that your flashing is done properly. Whenever you see it like that, you can assume that it has been stepped properly. And if you see the flashing all the way through and through, it's a little more than 1/4 inch, so that's great. What you're seeing right here is called spatter marks. Gives me a good indication of how big the hail was. Hail was probably about, I'd say, nickel to dime size when it actually hit. The impact of that hail, the shard, was probably pea size, a little bigger than pea size. Looked at the flashing all the way through. Your roof to wall flashing right here. You can see that there is flashing. So Renee, Keith, I'll get down, show you this video, and we'll go from there.